Zenimax Online Studios is radically overhauling Cyrodiil ESO PvP aimed at one thing. Can they finally fix the lag, or will it absolutely destroy the way Cyrodiil and PvP works? We're talking about stripping away skills, champion points, only base morphs of your class skills, and more. But the upside is, the lag, it was a lot less. So in this video, I'm going to do a deep dive on this new Vengeance server PvP change. Is it worth the hype? Was it solved? Or did it just make PvP absolutely lackluster and no fun? Get something out of this and like these ESO videos, hit that thumbs up, leave me a comment if you experienced it or what your thoughts are. Let's get started. If Elder Scrolls Online is known for anything, it's its unique action-oriented combat system and its persistent lag and latency issues on the server. So ESO originally launched in 2014, but the game's infrastructure and development started as early 2007. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of outdated server technology. This was replaced in April of 2023. This led to a temporary massive improvement in lag, and the player population spiked over 20%. The only comparable player population boost occurred during chapter releases, which introduces major yearly content. So to build on this success, Zenimax Online Studios introduced a double AP event in December 2023 to test increased population caps. Now I'm leading you to a point this will be relevant for what's currently going on. For years, players speculated basically what is the population cap inside Cyrodiil. So when the game originally launched, we kind of thought it was around 250 people per faction. There's 3 factions, so times that by 3 is the overall population before no one can jump back in. Now it's believed to be around 75 per faction and maybe even lower. And this is an issue, right? Because given Cyrodiil's massive open world environment, the lower the cap often results in basically just a handful of fights around an entire map that's vacant and nothing going on. So players spend more time riding their horses to battles than actually engaging in combat, and a lot of the combat, if it's a small sweaty group, players just bypass it because they don't want to engage and really have no incentive to do so. So as expected, this test in December didn't go so well. More players or not, the lag persisted. The fights condensed into specific areas on the maps, results in the usual suspects, crashes, nasty stuff. So that brings us to the Vengeance server, a radical overhaul and a new idea. This is what it said, and this is how it plays out. Zenimax launched this Cyrodiil limited time only, March 24th through the 31st, 1 week PvP environment where you could only jump into this special campaign called Vengeance. So with this approach, total radical overhaul. No gear except weapons. This means no monster helm, mythics, 5 pieces. Just you share a base set of stats for all players, and even no Mundus Stone. So basically you can just jump in with a lightning staff, which pretty much everyone used, sword and shield or whatever you want. You still get a front and you still get a back bar, but your gear is essentially irrelevant. And the weird thing here is class only base morph skills. So you're not able to pull weapon skills from weapon, armor, guild, Psijic order, vampire, you name it. It's just your class's fundamental abilities and base morphs. As you can imagine, some specific classes have massive advantages, specifically because of mobility and stealth. So think Sorcerer and Nightblade here. Also really interesting is you have reusable tri-potion and siege weapons. So there's no cold fire or advanced siege weapons. You're just keeping it very simple, and you can repeat and reuse these without going and buying other ones. So the reason behind all those restrictions is the game has to process all this data. As ZOS in the game, Elder Scrolls Online, has gotten more complex, you have a lot more variables, tons and tons of gear sets, right? Champion points, all these different factors, and every interaction requires these massive amount of calculations. They should be using AI for calculation. That's another video. In all seriousness though, they become more and more complex, so more and more data and more lag. So the idea and philosophy here, what I gather, is just limit the amount of input and data and see if that actually makes the lag a lot better. So there is good news with the Vengeance server. You're either going to love or hate these changes. So high skilled players with optimized gear sets and small sweaty groups, you're going to hate it. But for me, 41-year-old, yeah, I'm 41 now, dad reflexes, it's the most fun I've had in Cyrodiil in a long time. And the simplified gear sets and fewer siege, this resulted in time to kill increase. So no more unkillable ball groups spamming resto staff heals in this fully mid-max builds. Instead, fights become more about numbers and positioning, leading to wild Zerg v Zerg battles without a lot of frame drops or lag. Now, that said, the skill cap ceiling dropped significantly. I initially played my Dragonite but got wrecked without my usual survivability tools like Mistform. So I switched to the Sorcerer and it made a humongous difference. So I could use Bolt Escape and Shields and it let me roam solo and survive. The change also creates this class imbalance, right? So Sorcerer and Nightblades with built-in mobility and stealth, they have this humongous advantage over sluggish Templars and Dragonites, who have no way to compensate for their lack of movement skills. Now, you can get some major expedition and some movement, so yeah, there is ways around it, but it's just not the same as a Sorcerer or Nightblade. But one of the best aspects is no more stupid siege spam wars. For years, Cyrodiil had devolved into factions camping inside keeps, spamming cold fire, and farming AP without ever engaging in real fights. Without that nonsense, the map moved fast. In 1 hour, DC went from nearly crowning an emperor to being reduced to a single emperor keep. And the absence of ball groups and excessive siege allowed for constant dynamic battles. Without the stupid sweaty ball groups, you know who you are in the comments, people were able to run around freely and go explore the map. So the Puglets, instead of getting farmed outside of Nickel, are actually engaging and taking out siege and moving the map. And it was a lot more fun. However, there's some bad news. Without bomb sets or AoE burst mechanics, fights turned into sheer numbers game. The largest group almost always won. And while this made for prolonged lag-free keep fights, one fight was 50 v 50 and it ran smooth for ages. But it also meant no one could flip the keep. And you couldn't push these group out without these big, huge bombs wiping out 10, 15, 20 people at a time. So it's just a Zerg numbers game at this point, unfortunately. However, ganking, if you hate it or love it, was basically non-existent. Without cheesy proc sets or vampire exploits, stealth attackers couldn't one-shot players by charging a heavy attack, falling asleep, and letting their gear do the work. So I personally like this. It also made 1vx nearly impossible unless you played a Sorcerer or a Nightblade, because you couldn't just zip away. The Sorcerer has mobility and shield. Dragonite was very brutal. Another surprising outcome was tons of low-level players in Cyrodiil. So since gear, skills, champion points, all that stuff doesn't matter, anyone could jump in and contribute. And even at level 12, you were just as viable as someone with CP a gazillion. So it made the server a lot more accessible. Overall, the week-long test was a lot of fun for me, partly because the game actually worked. However, without a way for smaller groups to counter large Zerg battles because of a numbers game, it might not live up to what ZOS wants it to be. Or maybe they don't want that stuff in their game. So if ZOS wants to make this system viable, they need to introduce some mechanic that allows for outnumbered players to turn the tide. And maybe introduce something that's more skill-driven than just mashing your face against the wall against another Zerg. Another issue that I found is even on Saturday on PC North America, the server wasn't even pop-locked. So this suggests to me that the majority of Cyrodiil dedicated PvP players weren't interested in this test and they removed their hard-earned gear and skills, and that's a huge turnoff to them. But maybe ZOS can strike a balance with maybe a limited amount of sets, a limited amount of skills, and so it doesn't remove all the skill cap entirely. A hybrid approach could introduce a strategy with still improving server performance. Without that, hardcore Cyrodiil fans, they're just not going to come back. And new players aren't going to be attracted to PvP anyways. So my test had a lot of fun. This is the most fun I had in Cyrodiil in quite a long time, just because I could hop on solo. And yeah, I might get wrecked a couple times, so I'm just zerging around like a mindless little Zerg bot, you know, like myself, holding down heavy attacks, doing bolt escape, shooting off some frag, and it was a good time. I could put the game down. Versus what I experienced previously, which was everyone's hurtled up in the keep, I'm getting cold fired, 20 people dogpiling me. This is absolutely no fun. But they need to reintroduce some skill into the game, or I'll just hang out and do battlegrounds. Let me know in the comments, did you like this video? Want me to do some more ESO? Hit that thumbs up. Thanks for watching.